Whether you are on an adventure or at the downtown cafe, your answers are no more than a sniff away. Dog Training 360's purpose is simple: to teach you why dogs do what they do, as well as the action steps you need to take to have better communication, connection, consistency, and conceivability with your dog. I'd like to welcome everybody here to Dog Talk, and Rebecca and I will be having a conversation about different things about dogs and life and living with them and experiences that Rebecca's had, and also experiences that we've had together from a trainer and client perspective and also friend perspective with the dogs. So Rebecca, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and your dog journey and how we started together.
Sure. Well, when I met Joe, was relatively new to the dog world, even knowing dogs in my life, much less owning dogs. And shortly before meeting Joe, I had recently adopted from a shelter a black lab that I knew nothing about and had no idea what I was doing with him. And I desperately needed help because he, although super sweet and loving guy, was very leash reactive, which I did not know when I adopted him. And he was also very socially awkward off-leash with dogs. He really didn't know how to communicate at all with other dogs, and didn't really know much about communication with people either. And I dove into his adoption, him becoming part of my family, with very much attitude of, now he's part of my family and he will always be part of my family for his life, and we're just going to do this. And so after trialing a couple of other trainers with limited success and even being able to get out of the house with Austin, I found Joe, which was a great help. And together we worked through a lot with Austin, and got him, over the period of probably 5 years of intensive work, to a place where he could be a part of life, really. He could be in the house, he could be out in most situations on and off leash, and took a lot of work, but he recently passed over the rainbow bridge, as they say, but ended up having many happy years with us, and a good life.
So Rebecca, let's kind of back up just a little bit. You had tried several different trainers, and this, this is not about bashing on trainers or people or anything like that, but as you were trying to find the trainer that connected with you two, what was some of your experiences, and what did you like and what did you not like about as you went through that journey?
Yeah, I as I said earlier, really was going into dog ownership and relationship building completely blind. I had no experience at all before Austin, and in terms of training and really helping a dog. And so I didn't know at all what to look for in a trainer either. And the only thing I could really go with at the time was my sort of gut instinct of what seemed to both be right for the dog and also seemed to work. Mm-hmm. And part of what I found, I read a lot of books, and I had a similar experience with both trainers and books, in that there seemed to be one simple solution, one simple tool that a trainer would approach Austin with, and that was it. And if he couldn't sort of succeed with that tool, the other trainers that I worked with had didn't have anything else to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went through a few different methods of training that were very strictly limited to like one method with a trainer. And it didn't work. It didn't click
Yeah.
for him or for me. And so that was what was difficult, I would say.
Yeah. And then I believe that you contacted us, and I set you up with one of the trainers that worked for us. And let's talk a little bit about that experience, because I think it's, it was a really pivotal point with, I think me as a business owner, but also, just, I don't know, being aware and also being really appreciative that you as a client reached out and complained.
Can I jump in for just a minute?
Yeah.
Before Rebecca, you jump into getting set up with one of the trainers, can you describe some of those tools that the trainers were using?
Yeah, sure. It was quite many years ago at this point, but so I'll do my best. But like one of them, we went through a clicker training scenario that was very reward based with treats and food, and we went through a electric shock collar training that was in retrospect, there were many good things about it, but that was again the only tool, and it didn't really click with Austin at that point in time. Those are the two main ones.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So then, and you had a crazy schedule at that point too.
I did, yes.
Trying to finish up all your medical stuff.
Yes.
And so I set you up with one of the trainers that was working for me, and you also had a dog walker group at the time as well, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, and even just the frustrations there, and kind of what you felt.
Yeah. Okay. Let me dig into my memory.
I know.
I do remember it all very clearly, but let me think for 1 second. So yes, I had actually been referred to Joe by a good mutual friend of ours, who I had connected well with in the dog community, and she had referred me also to the dog walker group. And so Joe came to me with a strong recommendation and great, just like, you're in great hands. She's the best. And at that point in time, I guess our first meeting with your employee was you were not involved.
Yeah.
And so your employee came over and met Austin, and I guess sort of similarly to the other trainers that I had met with, assessed him as being pretty uncomplicated, and that this would sort of be an easy fix. That was my takeaway anyway, was that he was, a fine dog and just sort of needed a couple little shaping things and lessons here and there. And then over the period of time that she worked with us for the first, I would say probably a couple of weeks, she never changed that dialogue with me, but she definitely changed. She pulled back Austin's world, basically, and got him into a place where she actually had him training to run on my treadmill, and not go outside at all. And I lived at the time in a very small house with a small yard and right downtown, pretty urban area. And so after a couple of sessions, I think with her independently, if my memory, like she came over and trained him while I was at work, did sort of walk-in trains with him. She ended up suggesting putting a muzzle on him and training him to walk on the treadmill.
Yeah.
And so that's what she proceeded to do. And then I had a similar just gut feeling that as the other trainers that I mentioned before, it just didn't, I just couldn't imagine like having this huge 70-pound lab in my small little living room with his only outlet being to run on a treadmill. Like it just broke my heart, and I also it just didn't feel right to me. And so and at that point I had not met you, Joe, at all, and we only communicated just very, very minimally over email, like just to basically set up the sessions. And so I just like stopped it. I was just like, we're done.
Yeah.
And I think I just sent you an email and I was like, thanks very much, we're not doing this anymore.
I remember getting the email. We were traveling back from Montana from seeing our family up there, and I'm like, we can't do this. I remember Chris, reading it to Chris and us talking about it and really just kind of hashing through what steps we needed to take. Do you remember that, Chris?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I remember very clearly actually getting an email back from you, because when I sent the email saying I'm done, we're not doing this anymore, I was just, again, like I hadn't communicated with you pretty much at all, and so I was just I felt like it was like very much I'm buying a sandwich from Subway kind of situation. And I don't want that sandwich, goodbye, I'm leaving. And your response made me rethink that, because I remember your response being very heartfelt and being very thoughtful and saying, I don't remember exactly the words you used, but essentially, I'm sorry, and please let me help you. And I know that I can help you if you let me. And at the time I was just like, this all seems really weird. And so I said, well, thanks, but I'm still done. I'm going to try something else. And I did try something else. I think at that point is when I went to the shock collar trainer. And I made some headway with that group, but then had a couple of situations with Austin in a off-leash environment where I just felt like, I need something else. And so I reached back out to you after probably another couple weeks or a month and said, okay, you said you could help me. What can you do? Can we talk? And then you came over and met in person, and I remember that like it was yesterday, honestly. Like, came over, and the biggest thing actually was Austin immediately like went right to your feet and curled up by your feet. And I was like, what's going on?
I remember that.
Whose dog is this?
I mean, again, he was a very sweet in the house guy, but I was like, I don't know, something about that interaction. I was like, okay, listen to the dog. He knows that this Joe person is at least trustworthy, or whatever he's telling me. He's lying at your feet. That's got to be a good thing. And then we went from there.
I think that there's a lot of people that go through and experience that, but don't get the experience of the outcome that you got, and it makes me sad, because you can research all day long and hope that you find the right trainer, but there's a point where you just feel like you got to give up. And did you ever feel like giving up on him, on Austin?
I felt no, because I think if I adopted him today, I would instantly give up on him, because I've had different experiences since then that you've taught me. But at the time, I literally thought it was like adopting a child. Like it never occurred to me. Like I had adopted this being from a shelter, and I didn't have an option. Like I just had to somehow figure it out, because he was my responsibility, is how I felt about it. And so I felt very frustrated, and like I was in tears many times when he would, either hurt me, not aggressively, but just with his strength, or, that I couldn't get him out and he was restless, but I didn't ever feel like giving up on him. I just felt like I need to learn something more.
Yeah. 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 I think the one thing that I really appreciated when we had our consultation is, I could tell that you were at a loss, but you also had read a ton. And from a trainer's perspective to a client perspective, it was refreshing to have somebody that could throw stuff at me and keep my mind fresh, if you will, of, what about this? Or, how do we do this? And I've read this, and why are you doing this? And what's Austin thinking? And why are you doing what you're doing? And so it always made our sessions challenging in a way, because it had been a long time since I had somebody challenging enough. And not in a bad way, just you are a very educated person and you're a reader. And so, you wanted to know, and I think because you've gone through enough with all the other trainers, you really wanted to get in like, okay, can this person really help me? And so you were really trying to educate yourself on your side as much as listening and following the process on my side.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a piece with dogs that have behavioral challenges that people will tend to sit in silence for quite a while. Mm-hmm. Because it's not just a sit down, come stay problem. Right? It's very dynamic. You want to be active, and which you guys are. You lead a very active lifestyle, and I think you want your dogs to be a part of that lifestyle as well. But due to the dynamic behavior challenges that you have, it leads you to dive in. Rebecca, will dive in. She'll read. She'll absorb the information. But not a lot of people will do that. Yeah. Because they don't know what to do. Right. And I speak for me, really, that if I were in that kind of position, I wouldn't know what to do, even if I read the book. Applying that to my dog, how does that happen? So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's a good point, Chris. And for me, reading the books was incredibly helpful, because partly it gave me hope, because the books were all very simple, I suppose, and that, you're trying to get a loose leash walk, all you have to do is blah, 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 these 3 steps. And then look, this dog is walking perfectly in, on your left side on a loose leash. And I think anyone who has worked with any dog knows that it's unlikely to ever be that simple. Reading the books made me feel like, okay, there are other people out there with this, whatever this reactive dog thing is. It seems to fit Austin. He's not alone. I'm not alone. And then there is some solution. So I think that was part of why I was devouring books, was because they did give me some hope that people didn't just have these perfect dogs walking around the park that I saw. Absolutely. That there was some work that went into it.
Rebecca, can you describe a couple of the scenarios more in detail about the challenges with Austin?
Oh, goodness, sure.
And where I'm going with that is, if somebody's listening and they have a dog that, may have the same kind of challenges, just to know that they're not alone, and what to do, or some ideas of what to do other than calling Joe.
Joe. Well, call Joe, I would say. But to describe him, I think still, after knowing more dogs, I think he was quite a complicated character. Yeah. I don't know if you agree, Joe, but yep. I still can't quite pin him after all those years that we lived together. He was very, very sweet, as I said, and in the house, he didn't have obedience commands like you referred to, Chris. He was billed from the shelter as having all of his sit, stay, down heel commands, but he completely did not. It seemed like he had never been spoken to in English when I got him, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a challenge. But in the house, as long as he wasn't buzzing with energy, as long as he had some sort of focus, he was very sweet. And overall, he was never aggressive to humans, thank goodness. And I don't know what you would say about this, Joe, but in my opinion of him, he was never like truly aggressive towards other animals, but he was, I guess, reactive is what describes him. That it takes two to tango, and if there was any energy on the other animal's part, whether it was a dog or a squirrel, his only response to that was to lunge and bark and lash out.
Yeah.
Does that sound right to you, Joe?
Yep. Yeah.
So he was never intentionally aggressive towards anything, but it was just a response he had that it seemed like his brain sort of would leave his head is how it felt to me. But to your question, Chris, we lived right downtown in a big city, and we had really the only option to get anywhere was either to walk out our front door into a neighborhood that was, had a dog in every single house, pretty much. I mean, I can still remember the houses in our neighborhood that had the dogs, and it was pretty much every house had at least one dog. And to get to a park that was walkable from our house. And the park was a very big dog walking park. So there were always many, many dogs and there as well. And it was essentially impossible to get from our house to anywhere in the city without passing other dogs.
Yeah.
So the first piece that was challenging to your question, Chris, was just literally getting out the door. Like, walking out the door on a leash was a disaster because he would instantly alert to any movement, even a human or, like I said, a squirrel, and he would just ram to the end of the leash, all 70 pounds of him in huge force, and just start barking, number one, but also lunging. And this completely was shocking to me when I'd never even seen a dog do this when I first brought him home. But there were times when it's going to sound dramatic, but I swear to you all, he would leap as high as my head at the end of, full force at the end of the leash, barking. And it was quite scary, I'm sure, to anyone witnessing us. And to me, it was just very confusing, but also really, I couldn't move. I mean, we couldn't get anywhere. We couldn't make headway anywhere. And there was one time that somehow I had managed to get him to the park. I probably left super early in the day when no one else was awake or something like that. And we got to the park, and then he just lost it there because there were dogs, and we ended up behind a dumpster together, and I couldn't get him. I could not get out from behind the dumpster with him because he was in a state of frenzy of barking and lunging and leaping, and so I can't remember actually what I did to get home. It's like I probably blocked it out, but
yeah,
that was probably the closest I came to get back to your question, Joe, about giving up on him. I was like, I can't get home. It's half a mile from here, and I can't even imagine getting home. So that was one challenge. Another challenge was like I was describing, to leave our house, we had to either walk or drive, and he was terrible in the car, meaning that he could not be restrained in the car because he would start having doggy panic, I guess, barking, flipping, spinning, getting himself all tangled up in whatever kind of harness I could find for him, or and I had a small sedan type car, so I couldn't put a crate in it at that time, and so I couldn't actually restrain him in the car, but he would bark at any living being, and really loudly.
Yeah.
And in my ear, which was very anxiety producing for me, because he would just stand there and pant and bark in my ear, and then he would whine and squeak, which was also just caused a lot of anxiety to me. And he would do it for the whole, wherever we were, whether it was 5 minutes or 2 hours, he would do it the whole time. So driving anywhere was basically a nightmare. And then once we got wherever we were going, he was already so riled up that it was hard to even manage him out of the car. And then the third challenge was in off-leash situations, which I have learned through my journey with Austin, that some dogs are very reactive on a leash, but can be social and happy off-leash. Mm-hmm. He was very stunted emotionally, I guess, and just would very randomly get into scuffles with dogs off-leash. Sometimes he was fine and he could just walk past other dogs, and but more often I would say he would get into these scuffles that were scary, and he never got hurt and nobody else got hurt, but it was definitely scary to everyone involved, and of course I didn't want to inflict that on other dogs or other owners. And so even though there were many off-leash places to hike and go around where we lived, I always had to plan it at a time when I could either be on a trail that no one else, it was like a secret trail that no one else knew about, or it was like, 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So those were the challenges.
Thank you for sharing those.
So as you started down your journey with training, and this is not about me, it's not about trying to boost anything as much as it really is about the journey that what felt right with training, and what kept you going with working with me from my training style and perspective.
It was really I felt every week, and we met at least weekly for many years.
Yeah.
I felt there was not a prescription. Like, you did not, your methods, what worked for me, I guess I should say it that way, is that, and for Austin, is that you didn't come in to the house or to the lesson saying, okay, now today we're going to do X, Y, and Z. You came in listening first, and I remember clearly every single lesson we'd sit for sometimes even the whole lesson.
Yeah.
Or 45 minutes out of an hour, and you would just ask me what happened this week, and then I felt like I could see the wheels in your head turning as I was talking, and then you would sort of pause and say, okay, this is what we're going to do this week. And it always felt like the tools that we were going to introduce the current lesson that we were in were based on exactly where Austin was and where I was. I mean, I was learning everything too. So where the two of us were with our communication, and it wasn't ever like, okay, last week we did, A, so this week we're going to do B. It was very much not like that. It was like, okay, last week we did, this dot over here. So next, and because of what you've told me, we're going to jump over across the continent to this other dot. It's like, no, not even related.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember having deep conversations with you about that kind of thing. Like, okay, well, we did food, and treats last week. Why are we getting rid of that completely this week and doing this thing that I don't even see how it's related? And you could always explain it to me, number one, why we were shifting, and number two, or I guess number one, I always felt like you were responding to exactly what was going on. And number two, you could explain to me your thought process.
Yeah.
And I liked that.
Yeah. I think that, as we get going on our conversations and talking dogs every week, I just wanted to lay the foundation for everybody as far as where we started and the friendships that developed because of one crazy dog named Austin. And a friendship that will last a lifetime, but also just the journey and everything that you learned, and now, three dogs, past Austin in your journey of life, and just going through the different journeys. And so it really, our conversations will be, ones of joy and laughter and also some tears, but also, friendships. And as a dog trainer, you really get into people's lives, not just, going into their home, but you got to get into psychology of things and what's going on and trying to help, everybody. And it has been an amazing journey, and it continues to be an amazing journey as we have the most recent dog that was added to your household with us here in a completely different state now. And so it'll be fun to share with everybody as we go through the journey, but also we'll be talking about different things that we've read and different topics, and also your journey of moving and trying to find a trainer almost all over again, in a sense, to keep training and keep the dogs on the right track as well. So today I just really wanted to lay that foundation of you and our journey together and where we're headed, and Chris definitely was a big part of that journey and the friendships that started with it. So as we get going, we may pull Chris and Anne even into talking dogs and them thinking how crazy we are, and
I'm okay with that.
And even getting into the horses and just all of that, I think is just something to be said about what a dog trainer can become to somebody, and also just the intimate things that happen with dog training.
For sure. Rebecca, before we end this conversation, what would you tell somebody that may have behavioral challenges with their dogs? What would be your words of encouragement for them?
Have patience, and don't get locked into one particular vision of life with your dog, but be willing to put in work with training, and you will be able to have a life with your dog. It may not be your original vision of what you saw, but if you put in the work and you have patience and you have love for your animal, then you can figure out a life together.
That's beautiful. Very beautifully said.
Yeah. Yay.